You.
I'm great. Thank you so much for having me, Jen.
I'm really excited, and this is a little bit different. I'm going to have you jump in and share your story, and it will kind of unfold as we go.
Okay. Yeah. Well, there's so many places to start and
Mm.
so many layers to my story. So, I'm going to go with my gut and jump right in to the
Yeah.
thing that's coming up for me. So, I am a little bit different, as you said, for this podcast because I'm somebody who is not a parent. So, I am somebody who missed motherhood. And there are three different ways to describe that. That is either you're childless not by choice, you are involuntarily childless, or you're childless by circumstance. Those are three ways that we describe it. As opposed to somebody who's child free or childless by choice, meaning they intentionally chose it, they never wanted to have kids. There's a difference with women who have missed it, but really wanted it, which is we really wanted it. And there's a lot of grief that you have to work through to get to that place because now your life has blown up. And it's really weird. It's as if at some point, at some day in your life, this huge wall just went up in front of you, and all the dreams that you had in front of you just suddenly got cut off. And you were told, in whatever way, that this thing you always thought would happen in your life is not going to happen. And that it's such a stark reality to have to face, because for me, I grew up in a really big family. I'm from a family of 5 girls. My dad's from a family of 11. I have 53 cousins. So I have the fewest number of children any of the 11 had was 4. So that's why I have 53 cousins. And for me, I took it for granted that family was always there and that family would just happen. It never, ever occurred to me at any point in my life, even when I was struggling with the whole concept of am I ever going to have a child, that it wouldn't happen. It just didn't occur to me. And there's a number of reasons, we could get into, but I won't go there right now. So what ended up happening, is I had to work through my grief. And at the same time, I was going through the remnants of my divorce. So at 36, I was divorced. At 42, my body went into early menopause. So it just stopped. And that's very early to go into full-blown menopause. I went into it. So that's where I had to face it. I thought I'd have at least a few more years into my 40s to try to figure this out. I was working through so much stuff in my life, either from childhood wounds to the trauma that I had gone through in my marriage, to then add on top of that, suddenly learning that I was not going to be able to have a child in the natural way that I had always imagined. Now, granted, I could have, if I had had the wherewithal and I think, the presence of mind at that moment in my life, I could have made other choices, to make that happen using assisted reproductive technologies. But I just didn't understand at the time, even though my doctor had said it to me. But I just wasn't in a place to hear it. I wasn't in a place to receive that and be able to do anything with it. And so I ended up working through my grief and having to make a choice. Well, what do I want to do? Do I want to do something that would bring a child into my life in some way? And I decided I don't want to be a single mom because I didn't have anyone in my life. And no, I'm just going to make the most of my life and to figure out what it's going to look like without that child in it, and basically reinvent and recreate. And so that's what I did. Which has led me to what I do now. So I'll pause there for a second in case you have any questions that you want to ask about that.
I do understand. I know I heard when I was 15 that I might not be able to have kids and that I'd probably have to go through infertility, which is a really young age to hear that at. And
Yeah.
I felt blessed that I heard it so young. So I didn't think much of it at the time, but years later, I was really relieved because it planted a seed. And you're right. Most of us just think it's going to happen, right? And it'll happen when it happens. And when I was told I probably wouldn't have kids biologically, I can definitely empathize with that because I was able to go on and have kids biologically and through adoption. And I because we can't walk in anyone's shoes, I can't say, oh, if I had been you in that situation, because I have no idea, except that I feel that devastation very acutely when you're told that. And sure, hindsight, we could have a whole podcast series on hindsight,
Yes.
because sure, when you were 37, you could have gotten IUI or IVF and had a baby on your own. I think we're so presented with what's directly in front of us, that we do make the best choice at the time. But my heart hurts so much for you in that, because I've been in that first phase, and I mean, no blame should ever be on you for not doing something different, because we take things a day at a time, or anybody saying you should have done it differently, because, well, it's none of their business, but also
Sure.
we just don't know. We
Yeah.
just don't know. And yeah, my heart hurts for you, especially, well, I don't know. Is it easier or more challenging, or both, because both can be true, to have this huge family and be surrounded by it?
Mm. Wow. I think you said it perfectly, both. So, it was really hard for me when my baby sister, who's 11 years younger than me, started having children. To watch that it was like, wow, all of my sisters now have children, and I'm the person who doesn't. I have a niece now who's 30 who has a child. And now I've come to peace more with that in my life. And so the other part of it is I get to really enjoy my nieces and nephews. I get to be the cool aunt. I really enjoy them when they get older too, and hang out with them, go out with them, just really get to know them as people. So yes, I do have that piece, having a big family. And I also feel it more because I have the big family, just like you said.
You did you ever entertain the idea? I mean, I'm sure, did you vacillate with divorces can be a pretty traumatic thing, especially if the marriage was also traumatic. Did you entertain the thought and dismiss it because it wasn't the right time?
Well, as I said, I did not have the presence of mind. I was in a place, I call it my years of tears. I was in such a place of healing from so many things in my life that I just didn't have the capacity at that point to think about those things in the same way I could now. Applying logic to it was just really not on the table. It was me trying to get through each day, trying to be functional every single day. I mean, that was my goal, was to just be functional, to be able to show up for work, not be breaking down. I mean, I was working through a lot of depression, a lot of anxiety in my life. And so it was a tough time. And to go through that on top of it, it was a lot.
The good news, in my opinion, from an outside perspective, is you didn't feel like that would fix things. A lot of married couples are like, oh, we'll just have a baby and we'll fix it. And I'm like, no, it will not fix anything. And you could have had a similar mindset. Like, you know what? I'll just have a baby on my own. It will fix everything. And I mean, you really focused on yourself, and I feel like made the right choices for the right reasons, even though they were the harder choices.
Yeah. And I can see that, how you would say it's the harder choices. For me, I made the choice I had to make for me in the moment. It was like the only choice I was capable of making, which was to get to a better place in my life, to be more functional in my life. But I know what you're talking about. I've had women come to me, be like, I just know that if I have a child, it'll be like the fulfillment, of my life. And I'm thinking, well, I can see how you feel that connection inside, but the fulfillment of your life is who you are. Like, apart from being a mom, apart from being a woman, but as a human being, as a spirit being in this world, like that's who you truly are. And so I think sometimes we can use motherhood or parenthood to fill those holes, or to try to find that meaning that we're longing for. So I'm going to go into then like what I'm doing, and which comes right off of this. So, and I want to say too, that if there's anyone listening who is someone who is a childless woman and didn't choose it and is struggling with her grief, this next part might be a little bit triggering for you. So I just want to let you know, like, I've had women in the community who are like me say, how do you do what you do? Don't you get triggered all the time? And I'm like, I don't know. I just have the grace to do what I do. I don't know. I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. And so I keep going forward. So I am a statistic. There are 1 in 5 women in the Western world are childless. The majority not by choice. I'm sure a lot of people have heard that statistic by now. In other countries, I think in Italy, it's 1 in 2. It's like, it's definitely something that is happening in our world. And some people might say that's a problem. Some people may say that it's not. And I'm not here to talk about that at all. You can look at it how you want. My goal is for women to truly be empowered around this area of their lives. And so I'm a coach, and as I went into looking at being a coach, I thought for sure I would be working with women who were childless.
Okay.
People like me. And as I started writing and learning and digging into all of the messaging, I thought, wait a second, this is a symptom of something that's going on in our culture. What is going on in our culture that this statistic even exists? Like, what's happening? So I just started to delve in, and I started to talk to women, and I did some research, and I started to notice some patterns that no one was really talking about. And the patterns were, 1, no one's talking about it. That's the first thing. People don't feel they can talk about it. People are scared to talk about it. People think maybe there's shame in talking about it. I've actually had women say to me, well, if I have to talk about it, if I have to be intentional, that means there's something wrong with me. Because the cultural norm, and again, the things I'm going to say are my observations. They're not full-on truths, but the observations are that women don't feel that there's a space for them to have this conversation. And when they do, and if they have to, there's something wrong with them. And so what the patterns I noticed are silence, assumption, like I did, that it's just going to happen. Women feeling, sorry, my brain just went on pause. Women feeling that they are kind of alone, just like with anything we're struggling with. That there's no one out there who might get it or understand their certain set of circumstances that they're struggling through. But here's what I noticed. And this is like the overall paradigm. Because we're not talking about it, because we tend to blame ourselves for what's going wrong, right? We go internal. When a lot of women will tell you when they're struggling through infertility, like there's so much self-blame that goes on. And if you look at every step along the way in regard to motherhood, there's so much that we as women internalize, which we can tend to do anyway. We tend to take the things in and we take them on rather than being able to hold them on here and go, what's going on, right? In this case, women are not, like I said, in the silence. We've in a sense been conditioned to that silence. And the reason goes way back to how culture has been and what culture has nurtured in us and then culture changed and we've held on to the old ways. So let me re-articulate this because my words aren't coming out as well as I wanted. Basically, it comes down to this. We are living under an old paradigm, but we've been creating a new one. So when it comes to motherhood, we're still looking at things from a certain direction, and we're not acknowledging the fact that our lives have changed. And because we've, in a sense, left motherhood in the dust in terms of our empowerment. So we're empowered around our careers, right? We're empowered around, I don't know, how our bodies, fitness,
right,
all of that. But when it comes to motherhood, because of the silence, we're just not looking at it. We're not looking at it. And because of that, it's like, I describe it this way for people. Imagine that your life is like, you're in a room and your life has all these different doors around it. But behind the doors it's all connected. And when we open the door of career, we open the door of, family growing up, we open the door of romantic relationships, we open whatever door that is, but the motherhood door tends to stay closed. But consider the fact that room, because it's connected to everything else, is affecting every other part of your life. And because we're integrated beings, we don't live in silos, right? Everything is connected inside of us. And so women who come to me, I'm going to tell you, when they go through my program, what happens is they usually go from, well, this mindset of, well, it's just going to kind of work out. I don't need to do anything about it. And I've even had like a woman say, you know, it seems kind of silly that I even have to be here because it's just supposed to be something that's natural. Why should I even have to be talking about this? And so, but what happens at the end of it is they take on this greater amount of ownership. And that's the empowerment. It's like, this is my journey. This is part of my life. And I get to own it. And I get to, and through that, and it's not, I want to stress, it's not about the end result. It's not about them having the baby. It's about them owning this part of their lives to say, this is what I want. This is what I don't want. These are my boundaries around this. This is how it could look. And because of that ownership, the attachment that they have to that end result coming out exactly as they want it loosens up a little bit, or it's not there anymore. And so, and you've probably heard this in other areas, right? Like we want to be unattached from something. Like you want to be present, but not so attached to something. Like that's where a lot of the suffering in life comes from, when we're so attached to something because of all the things that we're making it mean. So imagine all the things women are making motherhood mean about them. For me, it was a sense of belonging in our culture. Like it wasn't just that somebody told me I wasn't going to be a mom naturally. It was that I now already struggling with the sense of belonging since I was young. Like, how do I fit into this world? Now there's another reason and more evidence that I don't belong. So that was like a thing that I had to look at and work through. But for other women, that might mean something else. That was my thing. For some women, it might mean that, and it might mean other things as well. So we work through those messages together. And what it does, it starts to clear the space out for them so they can walk the journey toward their vision with more freedom, with more joy, with more power in their lives, so that they're not just stuck spinning. Because most of the women who come to me, they're like, I really want this thing. I want this to happen, but I don't know how to get there. I have no idea how to get there. And they just want the like, well, tell me how to get there. Like, I can't tell you how to get there, like it's not going to happen, but I have a process. We have an experience that we can walk through together. So you can start to discover that and explore on your own what that really means for you. And in getting that ownership at the end, it's like they're not as attached, and they get to incorporate that part of their life, of themselves, into their full life. It's just like when we incorporate, I don't know if you're familiar with this concept. I've done a lot of therapy where you're doing integration work, where you're integrating a part of yourself, into the whole, into the adult self. It's kind of like that. It's like this part of us has been left in the dust, and now let's go and own it. Let's truly own it. And in that, there's just so much more freedom for them. And they now find themselves in action that they were not taking previously.
I'm an NLP practitioner, so I do parts integration actually. And that's something,
Okay.
I think for me, that was the most powerful part of becoming a practitioner and doing work. I think it's one of the easiest processes when you're talking about things from a therapy standpoint, but it's so impactful and so fast. So that's super fascinating. I love that because it's so, it makes such a significant difference because we don't realize, like, on one hand this and on the other hand this, and we're saying the same things, but we're in conflict with ourselves. So like that's a totally different topic also.
Yeah, right.
There's so much I want to unpack here. I think as far as the silence with women, and it's something that I've talked about on the podcast before, I think it starts when moms are buying pads and tampons for their daughters. Every single woman that you see everywhere is or was menstruating. Every one of us. And so why is this sort of like put the pads on the conveyor belt and hide them behind the oranges? We have this like, why is this a big deal? Why is it a big deal that we're buying pads and tampons? And that starts when our girls have their periods. And we have to buy it, or why are boys embarrassed to buy them for girls? We're starting it off at a very young age somehow, even when we're aware, like I'm aware of that, and making sure that I don't react in a negative way. And still, our teenagers are like, I don't want anybody to know. What? Like, why? Why is this a big deal? And women kind of don't ever open up. I mean, and I don't know that that's where it starts,
Yeah.
but definitely that's where you see women or girls reacting in a shameful way to something that's normal and natural in their body that they should never be embarrassed about. And then we take that and run with it.
Yeah.
Instead of women supporting each other and talking about it, we don't talk. Instead of supporting, we bash each other often. Um, we don't talk about miscarriages or infertility or like how much you love your kids and they drive you freaking crazy and you wonder why you thought you were fit to be a parent. I mean,
Yeah.
there's so much in it. And if you say this is so hard, someone shames you for like, well, at least you have kids and I thought you wanted them. And like,
Yeah.
look, both can be true.
Yes. Yes.
Um,
Yes. We can still be human beings. No matter how
right.
it
So
turns out.
the silence is a
Yeah.
really, really, really big deal. And it's rooted far before infertility or not being a mother and that woman saying it's just going to happen. And why do we have to talk about it? Well, you don't. You can keep this vicious, dysfunctional cycle going by not talking about it.
Yes.
Or,
Yes.
you know, when we share stories, we feel less alone because my story may not resonate it may resonate with 1 out of 100 people, but it's that one that we care about,
Yeah.
right?
Yes.
And so,
Yeah.
I mean, that was the podcast. I want more people sharing stories so more stories can resonate and it can make a difference to that one. But women, you're right, they don't talk. I want to make a comment, and I was going to save this, but I don't want to forget. Because I said at the beginning, you know, you have a really this is an interesting topic because you're a motherhood coach and you don't have kids. And I think where the first reaction is, well, how? And don't you get triggered? But also what a perfect fit. Because
Well, okay. Yes.
right?
Yes.
You get to
Yeah.
teach women how to work through their trauma if that end result isn't what happened because you've done so.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. Can I interrupt for a second? So
yes.
let me just tell you, I had this struggle, like, because I feel for me, everything that I got, everything that I've created. And so I wrote a book too, that's all about this. Like everything that I have, I feel has been spiritually inspired. Like I have been inspired. It has been a download and I have like done it and I kept going, but kind of like, why me? Like people see me and like, I'm not a mom. Why would they even think I'm the person? And I've had 2 coaches, both men, say to me like, well, you know, no disrespect, but like, one was like, most people come to coaches because they have the thing that they don't want. If you're not a mom, how can you do this? You know, and another one, like, why are you, and then I was like, okay, I get that. And I have to follow my gut on this. Like I acknowledge that, but what it forced me to do was to have to really work through why me, like, and it took a number of revelations and insights for myself to be okay and accept that. And I still have twinges of that at times. The thing that really keeps me grounded is knowing that I am where I am and I'm doing what I'm supposed to do. So let me give you the one that really made the difference for me was this. There is, you know, it's a truism that when you're not in the majority in a culture, when you are in the minority, you not only see the very intentional aggressions, but you see the unintentional aggressions, right? So I can't understand what it is to be a Black woman in our country. There's just unintentional things that go on. And I can say this with certainty because people don't understand the unintended aggressions they've had against me or microaggressions because I'm a childless woman. It's not that they're being mean. They just don't understand that question or the way they said something hurt my heart. They don't understand that because they haven't lived it. So I understand and see what the path is through to that like agency as a woman in life, so that my identity is more in being a human being before I'm even, you know, a woman or a mom. And that's what I had to go through as someone who was childless. So I know what the path is to get there. And that's what I'm offering women. It's like, you can have that same thing and you don't have to have it. You can do better than me. You don't have to wait until you missed motherhood to have it. You get to have more of it and you could have the child. And so that's what I'm offering.
Right. Well, I mean, in a different way also, I've had phenomenal OBGYNs and my infertility specialist,
Mm-hmm.
male. They're
Yeah.
never going through infertility. They've never had a period. They
Mm-hmm.
do not know what a
Mm-hmm.
cervical check feels like. They have no idea why, you know, but they were phenomenal obstetricians or
Mm-hmm.
specialists that I absolutely am so grateful that I had, and they will never be mothers. They will never
Mm-hmm.
go through labor. So,
Mm-hmm.
I mean, yes, we
Yes.
have obvious comparisons, and
Mm-hmm.
also, yeah, I mean, who better to help women who are struggling than someone who has struggled and gotten through it without the quote desired and outcome. And we can talk about how it's a journey and not the destination. When you're going through the
Right.
journey and it's really painful, it sure doesn't feel like the journey is
No,
the good part, right?
no, it
And
doesn't.
you're helping women figure out that journey, whether they end up having a child or not having a child. And
Yeah.
look, I got kids hook or crook. I was able to have
Mm-hmm.
them biologically, but I got them through foster care, private adoption, blended family. You don't
Mm-hmm.
like it's possible to have children from everywhere. And so it doesn't have to look a certain way. I think when we detach the idea that motherhood has to look a certain way,
Mm-hmm.
a lot can open up for us.
Yeah, right, exactly. And that's the thing too, like in my program, I give women, we do this whole, what we call like designing piece. There's like 7 modules and one of them is design. And in the design piece, I give them all these worksheets to work through, like what their priorities are in terms of motherhood, like how would they rank the kind of motherhood journey that they want? You know, how open are they to being a mom by adoption? How open are they to being a bonus mom or a stepmom? How open are they to being a single mom? You know, and so it helps them to narrow down and get really clear on what do I actually really want? And then look at, well, what if it doesn't work out? Let's say I know I have to be partnered and I want to have my own child. Like that is my number one. It's got to be that way. And then we look at, well, how else could it be for you? Like think about, and we look at ages, like how do you imagine, like what age you would be, you know, how comfortable are you with assisted reproductive technologies? Because I educate them and all of that. And so they get to just think through all of this. I have them write a letter to their future selves. So if they were in a place where they were struggling with their fertility and it wasn't happening, that they're saying to that future self what it is they think they might need to hear in the moment, and to remind them, kind of to ground them, because sometimes when women are in that space, they can just be going round and round and chasing the baby, and they get caught up in all of that and forget like kind of where they started. And so it's just really having good boundaries around all of it. Because if you know, I'm not willing to do more than like 3 rounds of IVF or 2 or none. Like,
Yes.
how do you know where to start? Like, you're just going to keep going, and the emotion then starts to dictate. So we bring all that in prior so that it sets you up for a more grounded experience in the future. At least that would be the goal.
I love this so much. I love the working on the trauma regardless of the child.
Mm-hmm.
In the end, you've either worked through it and are okay with not having a child, or you are in a much better place when you have a child. Because often we have kids and then we realize our triggers come up. Like having kids and being a parent actually can trigger a lot of us in our
Yes,
trauma.
exactly. Yes.
And so
Yes.
if either way, if you're going through this program, you're either a better parent or better not being a parent.
Yes.
And yay.
You got it. You got it. Yes, that's exactly it.
And that's huge because that's so far ahead of most parents.
Mm-hmm.
And sometimes we don't think of options.
Mm-hmm.
I mean, I recently just had a breastfeeding mom reach out to me, and she said, you know, my supply while pumping and going to work isn't very much, and I don't want to formula feed. And I said, have you considered donor milk? And she
Mm-hmm.
was like, oh, no, I didn't even think that that could be a possibility or that
Right.
I could afford it. And she got donor milk. So, I mean, often it's not that like there was nothing magical. I said nothing magical there,
Mm-hmm.
except just said, okay, well, you don't want formula and you don't have a supply. This is
Mm-hmm.
another option. Have you considered it? And you're giving people all these other options of what could be possible where they really they have the opportunity to look into it. And if there's a lot of resistance in that, well, like, no, I'm not interested in foster care. It doesn't mean I'm going to try to convince you to be a foster parent.
Right.
You would not be trying to convince them. It would be more like, well, let's look at why that's not a good option, because that could be uncovering trauma triggers too,
Mm-hmm.
or
Yeah.
issues. So they can move on and not be a foster parent,
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
but that now they know why and they can work through that trauma. So this is just, I mean, first of all, it's fascinating and I love it. And I love that you're flipping the script on the trauma, getting through trauma prior to parenting.
Mm-hmm.
Because that's very real. Becoming a parent and having trauma triggers is massively real.
Yes, we go through that. Actually, like in my program, I interview a woman who had to work through her issues with her mom, but didn't realize it until after she was a parent. And so it's just to solidify how important it is to look at these things, beforehand. I wanted to say something because I know we're probably coming close
We
to the
are.
end.
Yeah.
The way my program closes is really important, which is the whole last module is about what if it doesn't happen. So we create an alternate vision. And the point I want to make about it that I think is so important that we don't think about as women is that there's this whole underlying message going on, or a fear of what we're running away from, which is the fear of it not happening. And in facing that fear, it's like what it does is it sets us up to win rather than to be constantly chasing whatever it is we think we have to chase to not lose, right? So we would rather, like I always say, let's go forward in a way to win rather than to not lose. Because when we're looking at not losing, we're putting all that energy toward that fear and all of those things rather than here's what I want to create, and moving toward that.
I do want to say I love how you were talking about being in a room with the doors all around you and how we don't realize that when we open the doors on the other side, it's all connected.
Mm-hmm.
And we can either not walk through some or close some off. Because I think a lot of times, we become parents and we close the door on who we are as women or wives or in all these other areas because we don't feel like we can have that. And so I love that you're basically helping women open these doors, work through that trauma and move forward regardless of what happens. So that's a beautiful thing. Thank you so much, Beth. Thank you for being on and sharing.
Thank you for having me. It's been so great. Thanks for all your questions and for getting it. It's awesome. And if people want to find me, I do have social media. And it's just BethRivelliCoaching.com or Beth Rivelli Coaching on LinkedIn, Facebook, and Instagram.
And everything is listed in the show notes as well.
Okay.
So